Hi guys, my name's Emma. I'm a fourth semester nursing student, and today I'm here to talk to you guys about some of the realities or the inside scoop to working in healthcare. No matter what branch of healthcare you're working in, I'm sure anyone can relate to these. Let's go ahead and get started. So number one is something I knew this, but I did not realize it until I was having to do it and in the shoes of a healthcare worker, and it's that a hospital's open 24/7, 365, all year round, all day round, and then eventually I would have to be part of that. Which, what I mean by that is basically you will have to work holidays, you will probably have to miss family events, possibly. If you're working on a holiday and your family does something that day, you may be working nights, especially as a new grad. Sometimes you get sometimes we get the lesser wanted shifts as new grads, so you may be having to do nights for a while. So you may be having to adjust your sleep schedule. I know as a tech, I've had to do some nights here and there, and it's hard for me to sleep during the day. So buying blackout curtains, whatever you have to do in order to get sleep during the daytime, that was hard for me to adjust to sometimes. So yes, that would be my number one, is that you will have to work holidays, you may have to work nights, you may have to adjust your lifestyle to it some. I believe that's why some nurses, eventually once they have a family and they have kids, that's why they go to offices, or they start working an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 4 or whatever hours that office is open. They sometimes move to that opportunity instead of working in a hospital, because those hours are more flexible, so that way they can be with their kids more. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Reality of working in healthcare is that you want time with your kids once you have a family, and if that is something you're wanting, then you may have to adjust where you're working or see how flexible the hospital may be, and maybe eventually go to office work, working at a doctor's office or whatever that may look for you. Next, I would say would be working the 12-hour days. For people who this is their first job working 12 hours, I know it was for me. It was a lot at times. Your feet are sore, you're tired, it's an adjustment. Wear good shoes. Right now I wear Brooks. They're a little older, so I am looking for new ones. So if anyone has any suggestions, please list them in the comments. I would appreciate that. I wear Brooks right now, and I've really heard people like Hoka's. They really like Hoka's, and then some like the Crocs without the holes, like clog Crocs, I think is what they're called. Some really like those. I've seen different brands. So anyway, whatever works for you guys, but have a good pair of shoes. Compression socks, just make sure they're not too tight, but compression socks can really help too. And then yes, so be prepared for the 12 hours, whether that's day shift or night shift. Third, I would say you're going to have to deal with rude doctors. Thankfully, I've not had to do that too much yet as a student, but I've heard nurses during clinicals and nurses I've worked with at the hospital I work at talk about how doctors sometimes don't treat them well, but then sometimes you have a knockout doctor and they treat the nurses super nice, and they're really good to each other and they have a great relationship. So sometimes you're really lucky and you have good doctors that you work with, and then sometimes they don't always treat you very nice, and then sometimes the nurses are catching mistakes, or vice versa. Anyone can make mistakes, but sometimes they're catching mistakes and the doctors won't acknowledge that, and it's just, you will have to adjust and figure out how to deal with everyone's attitudes and emotions, no matter what kind of healthcare worker they are. So be prepared to deal with that. And then lastly, I would say I experienced this a little bit, but not too much. Thankfully, I've had pretty good preceptors during my clinicals, but in school, during my clinical rotations, I have sometimes had nurse preceptors that aren't always the kindest, or aren't always the nicest. They treat you like you're a fly on the wall, like you can't do anything, and if it's not in your scope of practice, then of course don't do anything you're not supposed to. But sometimes I felt like I did not matter and I didn't exist to the nurses I was working with, and sometimes they weren't very nice. So anyway, you may have to deal with that. I'm so sorry in advance, but just brush it off. just let it roll off your back and roll off your shoulders and move on. Just because they might have not treated you the greatest does not mean that determines your future, and that does not mean you're not a good nursing student. But then sometimes I've really lucked out, and honestly, I've had really good preceptors. I have to say, I think most of mine have been really good, and I've had good turnouts, and everyone has treated me very nice. And then sometimes they really engage you, because sometimes they won't talk to you, and it's like you're just standing there and you feel like they don't explain to you what's happening, or you're like, okay, so what is this? I've never experienced this before. But then some, they engage you and they're like, hey, come look at this. Like my surgery rotation, they were like super nice, and they're like, hey, you want to see this? Hey, you want to jump in this OR room? There's this going on. And it was just, they were awesome. And like sometimes you have great experiences, and they like just, you feel like you learn so much because they really engage you. So anyway, you may have good and you may have bad, but be prepared. Sometimes you may have some that aren't always the nicest, may not treat you well, but use that as motivation that when you are a nurse and you have nursing students that you're precepting and you're showing around and you're teaching, like take them under your wing and help them a lot. And so yeah, use that as motivation to one day be the nursing preceptor that you wish you had. So anyway, guys, those are the realities part 1 of healthcare and nursing school that I would say. Again, if you guys have any, please mention them below. And it was nice talking to y'all. Scroll through my channel and I will be posting more as I can, and eventually I will make a schedule. So bye guys, thanks for joining.